On October 23, 1906, in the city of Paris, a crowd held its breath. The world of aviation, a world that barely existed, was watching. In the silent field of Bagatelle, a strange-looking machine, like a collection of giant boxes with wings, roared to life. Its tiny engine screamed, a sound of desperate effort. For a few tenth seconds, it rattled across the grass. Skeptics in the crowd prepared to write it off as another failure. Then, something happened. It lifted. With no ramp, no catapult, no external help. For 60 meters, it flew a few feet above the ground, a brief but defiant victory over gravity. For the first time in the public eye of Europe, a machine heavier than air had taken off, flown, and landed entirely by its own power. On that day, the name of Brazil, a distant tropical nation, soared into the skies of the modern world. A man made history. But this man was not born from struggle. He didn't grow up with the hunger of poverty driving him towards fame or fortune. In fact, he was born into the opposite. He was the heir to one of the greatest fortunes in Brazil, the son of a man known as the Coffee King. He never had to work a day in his life. He could have lived in unimaginable luxury, a quiet life of parties, travel, and comfort. This is not a story of a man escaping poverty to reach for the sky. It's the story of a man who, despite having everything on earth, chose to risk it all for a dream that lived only in the clouds. This is not just the story of an inventor or a wealthy aristocrat. This is the story of Alberto Santos Dumont, the father of aviation, the gentleman of the skies, the boy who owned the world but dreamed only of conquering the air. He was born on July 20th, 1873, not in a small town, but on a sprawling, technologically advanced coffee plantation in the state of Minas Gerais, Brazil. The property, named Cabangu, was a world unto itself. His father, Henrique Dumont, was a brilliant and visionary engineer of French descent. He had transformed the wild Brazilian landscape into the largest and most productive coffee plantation in the world. The Dumont estate wasn't just a farm, it was a mini-industrial city. It had 96 kilometers of private railway, 7 locomotives, and state-of-the-art steam-powered machinery for processing coffee beans. Henrique Dumont was a king, and his kingdom was built on technology and innovation. It was in this world of powerful machines that young Alberto grew up. While his older siblings were being groomed to take over the family business, Alberto was different. He was quiet, small for his age, and intensely curious. He wasn't interested in the price of coffee or the logistics of export. He was mesmerized by the locomotives, the steam tractors, the complex gears of the processing plants. He would spend countless hours in the plantation's workshops, watching the mechanics, asking questions, trying to understand the principles of steam power, of propulsion, of movement. He famously said that he spent his childhood looking up at the bright blue sky of Brazil, wondering about the freedom of the birds, dreaming of a way to join them. His father, a master of machines himself, recognized this unique spark in his youngest son. He allowed him to drive the steam tractors and even the locomotives on the plantation's railway. For a young boy, this wasn't just a game. It was an education. He was learning about engines, pressure, and control in the most practical way imaginable. At night, his imagination was fueled by the adventure novels of Jules Verne. He devoured stories of fantastic flying machines and voyages to the moon. For Santos, these were not just fantasies, they were blueprints for the future. He didn't just want to read about adventures, he wanted to build them. While other boys his age were playing with simple toys, Santos was building his own miniature mechanical contraptions, little rubber band-powered airplanes and helicopters, testing them, watching them fail, and trying to understand why. The dream of flight was not a passing fancy. It was the central organizing principle of his young life. In 1890, a tragic accident changed the course of the family's history. Enrique Dumont fell from his horse, leaving him paralyzed. Unable to run his vast empire, he sold the plantation for an immense fortune. A year later, he moved the family to Paris, the cultural and scientific capital of the world. Before he did, he called his young son Alberto, who was then just 18 years old, and gave him his inheritance. More importantly, he gave him his freedom. He told him, "I don't want you to become a doctor or a lawyer. Go to Paris. See the world. Choose your own path. I would rather you be a man of science." With this blessing and a fortune that made him independently wealthy for life, Santos Dumont arrived in Paris. He was free. He had no obligations, no need to work. He had only one all-consuming obsession: to learn everything he could about the science of flight. Paris in the 1890s, the era known as the Belle Epoque, was the perfect crucible for his ambitions. It was a city buzzing with invention, a place where art, science, and technology were colliding in spectacular ways. But Santos did not enroll in a prestigious university. He distrusted formal education, believing it was too slow and too rigid. He wanted to learn on his own terms. He created his own university, a university of the streets. He hired private tutors in physics, chemistry, mechanics, and electricity. He spent his days devouring books in libraries, and his afternoons visiting industrial workshops and laboratories. He was a familiar sight at the city's automotive clubs, fascinated by the new internal combustion engine. He understood, years before most, that these powerful but lightweight engines were the key to powered flight. His first direct experience with aviation was as a passenger. In 1997, he paid a balloonist to take him up into the sky above Paris. The experience was transformative. He was enchanted by the profound silence, the feeling of floating effortlessly above the world. But he was also frustrated. The balloon was a prisoner of the wind. It could go up, it could go down, but it could not be steered. It was not true navigation. He wanted to be a pilot, not just a passenger. He wanted to be the captain of his own ship in the ocean of the air. He wanted control. He wanted to fly against the wind. This became his first great challenge, the problem of dirigibility. He immediately set to work. He didn't just design a new airship. He learned to build it. He studied how to manufacture hydrogen gas, the highly flammable substance that would lift his creations. He learned how to stitch the delicate silk envelopes. He designed and built his own engines, always pushing for them to be lighter and more powerful. In 1898, he was ready. His first creation, the number 1, was a small, cigar-shaped airship, just 25 meters long. It was powered by a motorcycle engine. It was revolutionary. On its first flight, it showed promise, but it ended by crashing into trees. He was unhurt, but the airship was damaged. Santos was not discouraged. He simply took what he learned and built the number 2. It failed. Then came the number 3, which he used to fly around the newly constructed Eiffel Tower, but it too had problems, losing gas and forcing him to land. The Paris press began to take notice, often mockingly. They called him Le Petit Santos, the Little Santos, a rich Brazilian playboy amusing himself with dangerous and expensive toys. He was seen as a novelty, a daredevil socialite. But they misunderstood his nature. He wasn't a reckless amateur. He was a methodical engineer. Every failure, every crash was a data point. Every broken part was a lesson in material science. Every unexpected gust of wind was a lesson in aerodynamics. He was relentlessly scientific in his approach. The dangers were immense. In 1901, while flying his number 5, he had a catastrophic accident. The airship's hydrogen valve failed, and the craft began to deflate rapidly. It crashed into the rooftop of the Trocadero Hotel, leaving Santos dangling precariously high above the streets of Paris, saved only by a thread as the remnants of his airship hung from the building. The Paris fire brigade had to perform a dramatic rescue. Most men would have quit after such a near-death experience. Santos Dumont simply went back to his workshop. He famously said, "Things are more or less in the nature of an obstacle, but I will overcome them." And he was about to prove it. The biggest challenge in aviation at the time was the Deutsch de la Meurthe Prize. A prize of 100,000 francs was offered to the first person who could fly an airship the Park of Saint-Cloud, circle the Eiffel Tower, and return to the starting point, a distance of 11 kilometers, in under 30 minutes. It was the ultimate test of speed, reliability, and most importantly, control. Santos Dumont accepted the challenge. He built the No. 6, a larger, more powerful airship. On his first attempt, he completed the course, but he was a few seconds over the time limit. Disappointed but not defeated, he prepared for a second try. On October 19, 1901, a huge crowd gathered to watch. Santos lifted off smoothly and headed for the tower. He rounded it perfectly, but on the return journey, his engine failed. The airship began to drift helplessly. For anyone else, the attempt would be over. But Santos was not just a pilot, he was a master mechanic. High above Paris, with the crowd watching in horror, he climbed out of his small basket, balanced himself on the thin keel of the airship, and without a safety harness, calmly made his way to the engine. He fixed the problem, restarted it, and returned to his controls. He raced back towards the finish line, landing just 29 minutes and 30 seconds after he had started. He had done it. He had won the Deutsch Prize. He had tamed the wind. The world erupted in celebration. Santos Dumont was no longer a rich playboy. He was a global hero, a symbol of human ingenuity. He was mobbed by crowds wherever he went. He became a fashion icon. His signature Panama hat and high-collared shirts were copied by men all over Paris. He was a friend to kings and a hero to the common person. But what he did next truly defined his character. He took the massive prize money, 100,000 francs, and did something remarkable. He gave a large portion of it to his team of mechanics and assistants. The rest he donated to the poor people of Paris. When asked why, he simply replied that he had not entered the competition for money. He was doing it for the dream, for the advancement of science. This act cemented his legend. He was not just a great inventor, he was a man of impeccable character. He was, in every sense, the gentleman of the skies. He had achieved what many thought was impossible. He had made air travel a reality. He could have stopped there. He was already one of the most famous men in the world. He had proven his point. He had conquered the world of lighter-than-air flight. But for Santos Dumont, this was only the beginning. The greatest challenge still remained. Balloons and airships floated because they were lighter than the air they displaced. They were magnificent, but they were still, in a way, cheating gravity. Santos dreamed of something more profound, more difficult, more elegant. He dreamed of a machine that did not depend on gas to lift it, but on its own power and design. A machine that was, by its very nature, heavier than the air itself. The concept was so radical that most serious scientists of the day considered it a physical impossibility, a fantasy reserved for novels and children's toys. But Santos Dumont had just shown the world that he could turn fantasy into reality. He had tamed the wind. Now he was going to defy gravity itself. The world thought it was impossible. Santos Dumont was just getting started.